Ladies and gentlemen, the biggest and most popular Marvel Snap meta report is here, and it is time for me to review it. It is Marvel Snap Zone's meta report. Just came out, hot off the press, 1 hour ago, and I haven't looked at it yet. So this is a live reaction. All right, in Tier 1, we have Shuri 0. Definitely agree with this being in Tier 1. And Sera Control also finding its way into Tier 1. I'm a bit surprised that it has made it into Tier 1, I'll be honest. Sera Control. I do think Shuri is the best deck by a while. Then Thanos would be definitely my pick for deck number 2. And then I would say that Sera Control should be lower down. That's a little bit of a surprise to start things off. In Tier 2, we have Doom Wave, Zabu Dark Cork, Dracula Discard, Patriot Electro. Still no Thanos is the most surprising thing here. Just disregarding that, let's have a think about the rest of the decks. Well, Doom Wave is great. I'm actually playing that right now at the time of recording. Video coming soon. Zabu Dark Hawk is solid. Dracula Discard is actually pretty solid as well. I would agree with that being a Tier 2 deck. We'll have to look at the list. Patriot is good. Electro is good. So I like all the decks in Tier 2. I'm just really surprised that Thanos still isn't here. Because I would put Thanos... I would probably put Shuri at Tier 0 and then a few more decks at Tier 1. But yeah, I mean, if we're not doing Tier 0, I would put Shuri at Tier 1. Thanos probably at Tier 1 as well. Tier 3, we have Thanos Zoo. Zoocula, whatever the hell that is. I think it's like Dracula with Zoo. Silver Surfer, which is nice, although they're playing Sera in there, which is not correct in my opinion. We have Thanos Lockjaw at Tier 3. Definitely disagree. Lockjaw Thor at Tier 3, fine. Galactus at Tier 3, fine. Deathwave Tier 3, and then Negative in at Tier 4. All right, let's take a quick look. We've also got Silent Performance of the Week, She-Hulk Magic, which I've checked out, which is basically worse than Doomwave, but pretty cool. Atuma Destroyer, which I've heard good things about, and Bounce. All right, let's take a look at the lists. Definitely agree with Shuri being the Tier 1 deck. How's the list looking? I've never understood Polaris in this deck. Everyone plays it, or at least like the main net deck does. I also prefer Captain Marvel over Vision. Just not for... Vision's fine. Vision can still get Shang-Chi'd though, right? You can move it away from your Cosmo, move it away from your armor, whereas your Captain Marvel can't get Shang-Chi'd. That's why I prefer Captain Marvel over Vision. This slot for Polaris, I don't exactly have a card I really care about putting in here. Polaris can be good against some Zoo decks. It can be good against Galactus. I just feel like there's got to be a better card than Polaris in this one. Even like Chavez, just to give you like your Cosmo on 3 more often, Shuri on 4, I think would be significantly better than Polaris. This list looks smooth. I just don't really believe that the Polaris is the optimal way, but lots of people do. Nothing wrong with this list at all. Again, personally, I would go Chavez for Polaris, but I put Chavez in everything, and I would put Marvel for Vision. There might be something better than the Chavez for the Polaris as well. I just don't really play Shuri because I'm not a nerd. Well, I actually am. Sera Control also makes Tier 1, which I'm surprised by. The list also, I'm not really loving the look of. So the idea of Sera Control is you play Sera on turn 5, and then on turn 6, you play a bunch of control cards. So Zabu, definitely a card you want to be playing in here, because then you can play Shang-Chi and Enchantress. Enchantress did get cut from quite a lot of these Sera decks in the previous months, but I do think it's probably just about worth including again, with decks like Patriot being quite popular. There's some decent targets for Enchantress. Certainly not a card you must have. Then there's also been some builds which play Bishop, which I think is just a mistake. Particularly with this setup. Obviously, Bishop with Mysterio has some nice synergy. Then your Nova can buff the Mysterio. So I can certainly see the logic. However, there's no Angela here, which is very odd. Angela, just a really good card. There's no Hood. I think the Hood is very good in these decks because you can kill the Hood, the -2, and then play the Demon on the last turn. The Lizard makes the cut. If you're not playing Dark Hawk, which some of these decks do, I think Maximus is going to be a really good option as well because it's going to cost you just 2 on the last turn. Sentinels can be good as just early cards to play. Valkyrie makes the cut in Sera Control, which is curious. Not a card I've ever tried in Sera Control, so your Valkyrie is going to cost you 4 energy, and then you can play some other, you can play Mr. Sinister, you can play Mysterio, for example. It's an interesting take. I don't like the list, I have to say, and I don't agree with it being Tier 1. I can check it out before, I judge it too much, but Valkyrie just feels like it's, conflicting too much with Shang-Chi, I'm not really sure there's a huge advantage to playing Valkyrie over Shang-Chi. Obviously, okay, armor is the obvious one, but you have an Enchantress. You can go Enchantress and Shang-Chi for just 4 energy, and you can play Valkyrie for 4 energy. So this is the big kind of alarm bells deck list in this Marvel Snap Zone meta report. There sometimes is one, but this list just doesn't look optimized, and I don't believe Sera Control is on the same level as Shuri, not even close. I think it's a tier 2 deck, sure, but this is not the list, not a build I like the look of, and I don't think it should be in tier 1. All right, moving on. A different version of Sera. I've still never tried this, but like with Hazmat and Luke Cage, definitely a cool deck. Again, certainly not a tier 1 deck, but this is just like as a different version. It did show up in the data, so it could be worth testing. Cool. So nothing wrong with adding this on as like a different way of playing this deck. Okay, tier 2. Doomwave. I've actually been checking out Doomwave right now, and I'm very impressed by it. I am going to be uploading a video coming pretty soon, and I also have, you know, my own meta report coming out in the next few days now that the meta is a bit more settled. Goose. There's no Goose in this one. My list looks very similar. I love the Chavez inclusion here. Chavez is really nice. If you don't know this deck, basically Wave is now insane. The reason Wave is so good, you play Wave on turn 5, and then on turn 6, you can play either Arrow and She-Hulk, and Arrow just moves the last card played, and of course you're limiting your opponent to only playing 1 card, or you can play Doctor Doom to put points into all 3 lanes. The Iceman, the Scorpion, all cards I like. The Shang-Chi is fine. The White Queen's interesting for that information. You get to see what your opponent's playing, but really this deck definitely wants to play Goose. Goose is just so good with this one because you can sneak stuff in with Doctor Doom. You can play She-Hulk into the Goose lane on turn number 6 with your Goose. Yeah, this list looks fine, but not optimized. Again, this looks solid. Just the one that I'm going to be sharing with you guys soon is definitely better. But definitely a good deck and definitely tier 2. Next we have Zabu Devil Dark Hawk. Not a deck I've played, but I can definitely get behind this being a tier 2 deck. Dark Hawk, I think people have tried it in Sera Control decks, and I don't think that's the way to play Dark Hawk. It just doesn't quite feel that good there. But with Devil Dinosaur, your Mystique has a couple of great options with either Dark Hawk or with Dino. Also, in those Sera Control decks, you play Killmonger, which makes the Korg much worse, and Korg feels very good in this one. Moon Girl can give you double Dark Hawk, potentially. This just looks really nice, and I like the way it's built. Maybe one thing, if I was to change anything, would be to try and get America Chavez in there. With Moon Girl, it often does just make sense to play America Chavez because you often have a full hand and you don't really care about that last card you're drawing. But this list looks very solid. Okay, Dracula Discard. I'm really happy to see this deck making the cut. This looks pretty much exactly like the list that I posted on my YouTube yesterday. I definitely agree with this. The one difference in my version is I'm playing Leech instead of Sunspot, which I'm sure you guys can agree that Leech is going to be more impactful than Sunspot. I don't like Sunspot in lockjaw decks in general. Not a big fan. Of course, the Thanos decks do play Sunspot, but that is a very different kind of lockjaw deck. You don't want to find this Sunspot coming off your lockjaw. With Leech, you can find Leech early off lockjaw and you can play the Leech into the lockjaw deck. I did a whole video on this deck. It really is a good deck. I think it's a solid tier 2 deck, and I definitely agree with its position. Very underrated. Leech not being a threat very often now makes this deck a lot better. Patriot. I agree with Patriot being a tier 2 deck as well. There's still a bunch of different ways you can go about building Patriot. It wouldn't be this way for me. Bishop, I just don't understand why you would ever play this card. I think it's so overrated. Okay, I can understand the synergy with Mysterio, but if you get Bishop down on turn 3, realistically your Bishop is playing for like a max of 6 or 7 points, and often you're not finding Bishop until turn 4, turn 5, turn 6, and then it's just unplayable, right? So the Bishop, that can be gotten rid of. There's been some interesting builds with Valkyrie recently. Does make a lot of sense with the fact that your Patriot, your Blue Marvel are buffing up. I think Valkyrie and Iron Man are both really good cards here. Bast is solid as well. The list looks good with the exception of this Bishop. Get rid of the Bishop and suddenly the deck looks a lot better. Looks like a nice build, honestly. Mr. Sinister, I also wouldn't go for. This deck is lacking Debris. I think you definitely want to play Debris in these ones as well. Even with the Mysterio and with the Squirrel Girl, you don't have to play the Debris necessarily, but it just gives you that little bit of extra swarm that you might need. It's an interesting build. I definitely don't hate it. I just don't like the Bishop. Okay, cool. Electro Ramp, again, I definitely agree with its position. There's one change I would make to this one, which is what I've said about lots of Electro Ramp decks, because this is the main version that people play. Lizard should get cut for Scorpion. The reason for that is you're only playing Lizard with this deck on turn 2, and Scorpion is going to be more impactful on average. I will say that Lizard with Sandman is obviously quite good, but I think that Scorpion should just about edge it. But if you do go Lizard, Electro, Sandman, the good chances your Lizard is going to be 5 points. So you definitely don't have to cut it. I think the Scorpion is just slightly better. You also might just want to consider playing both of them to just even out that curve. Shang-Chi could go. I think Magneto could go. I do tend to like Shang-Chi though because people don't expect it as much. But yeah, maybe you just want to add Lizard alongside Scorpion just to make sure you've got that nice curve. Because a key thing of these Sandman decks is that you actually want to be ahead by the time you Sandman, right? You don't want to be behind and then catching up. You already want to be ahead. Aero's really good with Electro as well because with Sandman rather, because you're limiting your opponent to 1 card per turn. So that Aero, just like the Wave deck, is very impactful. Definitely agree with Sandman being in turn 2, in tier 2. It would be higher. It's just very bad into Shuri. Very, very bad indeed. Okay, tier 3, we have Thanos. Thanos in tier 3? Thanos should be tier 1, bruv. Pretty sure. There's a lot of like different ways of building Thanos. This wouldn't be my top pick. This is basically a similar list to the deck that Ordinary Harry won the New York City tournament with over a month ago now, which was kind of the deck which really put Thanos back on the map as a serious deck. This looks fine. It wouldn't be my go-to though. Hopefully we see some other Thanos decks which we can kind of take a look at. We have Dracula Zoo, which I think this is a tier 3 deck. I still have never played it, but I just don't really believe in it being that good. It looks like a solid way of building it. Your Dracula can hit Red Skull and Infinite. Maybe you should be playing Chavez. I don't know. I don't play the deck, so I don't really have too much to say on that one. Next we have Silver Surfer, which I do agree with being on the meta report. I honestly think Silver Surfer could be a tier 2 deck though. I'm pretty convinced. The build I uploaded on my YouTube a few days ago has just been getting so much good feedback from people saying this deck is popping off. It got them to Infinite. It doesn't play Sera, it plays Kingpin, and I think that's going to be the way to play that. So I'm not really going to talk about this list too much. I actually do like the idea of this one where you play Zabu with Wong and Absorbing Man, because your Absorbing Man can copy the Silver Surfer, and Absorbing Man does now work with Wong, and you get to play Shang-Chi. So I actually do like the approach to this one. I do. But I prefer my list. But I do like this build. This is cool. Patriot, don't play Patriot with Silver Surfer, is bad. Thanos Lockjaw in tier 3. No. This build is weird. Like, you need Sunspot. Quinjet has disappeared, and you probably just want to have a more lower curve with this deck rather than having so many just like big high cost cards, I would wager. I don't like the build at all, really. I would play Sunspot still because, like, a lot of the time you do skip turns. And I know I just said I don't like Sunspot in Lockjaw decks, but with this deck, it's much less likely you're actually finding the Sunspot off of Lockjaw because you have a smaller deck. I think you just want to be playing, like, lower curve cards, right? Like, I could even see playing Nightcrawler. There's Killmonger versions I've seen with Death and stuff. I haven't played much Thanos, so I don't have too much to say on it. I do like the Doom and Odin kind of ideas. But yeah, this build just looks weird, to be honest. So it's no wonder that this has been put in tier 3 if this is the build they've been testing, because it doesn't look good. You just want like a lower curve now, right? I think Armor definitely, I think, is going to be an important card because you're just losing to Killmonger now. Otherwise, before Killmonger wasn't a big deal because you could just cheat out so many big stats elsewhere. But I would be putting Armor in here. I'd be playing Sunspot. I think like the curve is just too high here. Magneto can go for sure. Yeah. All right. Lockjaw Death. Yeah, this is probably a slightly better version of Thanos. Again, I don't massively love the way it's built, but I think with the Killmonger you can get away with this kind of approach. This deck plays Wave. I think this is going to be definitely better than this one, but I would build this one differently. I do think this is a serious deck. I'm not sure on Thanos. Thanos is either like... I would just put Shuri in tier 1 on its own, honestly, and Thanos at the top of tier 2. I think that would be a fair way. I think Shuri's just in its own lane at the moment. There's another Thanos deck. As you can see, a bunch of ways. Thanos Lockjaw on reveal as a build. Tier 3 for sure. Maybe even tier 4. I don't really believe in this deck. We've got Galactus. I'm surprised Galactus isn't in tier 2 as well. Marvel Snap Zone often doesn't rate Galactus as highly as I think it should be. I don't actually own Galactus myself, so I don't have too much to say on the build. I do think that you want to play Chavez with Galactus, though, to be honest. I'm not sure on the best way to play Galactus. I still don't own the card. As much as I want it, I'm spending my tokens instead on the new cards to make videos. Deathwave in tier 3, fine by me. I don't think it's that bad. It doesn't see that much play. And yeah, that's the meta report. So overall, I think it's solid. The lists are pretty good. I think, like, in my opinion, and I'm interested in seeing your comments, the glaring issue is Sera control on tier 1. I don't believe in, especially with the build. And I think Thanos being in tier 3 is just wrong. We can look at the data on untapped.gg of the decks people have actually been playing, and we can see that Thanos is one of the highest win rate and highest cube rate decks in the meta right now. If you want to see the data on untapped.gg, there is a premium service, but I uploaded a video yesterday or a couple days back now covering that. So if you want to see that and see which kind of decks have the highest win rate, cube rate, we just removed Shuri and Thanos from the equation at one point. But yeah, this is a very good tier list. I do just think it's let down by having Sera in tier 1 and Thanos in tier 3. But apart from that, I like it. It's really good. The decks are nice, well built. Is it perfect? No, but of course, all these things are subjective. I think it's a really good effort. Good job to Marvel Snap Zone. Big shout out to them for all the amazing content they put out. Let me know, again, in the comments what you guys think. Is there any decks they missed out on? Do you agree with me that Sera control shouldn't be tier 1? Do you agree with me that Thanos should be tier 2 or maybe tier 1? Like the video, subscribe, and see you on the next one. Bye.